Hi, welcome to the small shed. This Saturday I'm trying to put right some damage from Storm Ciara. See you in a minute. Now, we came back from being away the other weekend when the storms were so bad, and fortunately I can report that the children's play equipment we put up last year, which did get blown down virtually straight after it was put up, and we then moved it and anchored it down much more securely, that is now still standing firm and withstood the storm without any great problems. But when we came home, I just happened to have a look out one of the bedroom windows to see what the noisy neighbours were up to at the back, and I noticed that we'd had a problem with my wife's greenhouse where there's a finial and a weather protection capping on top of it, and that had disappeared. So I had to go out in the garden, have a quick look around and find where that had got to, and it's a bit of a sorry sight, I'm afraid. Now, this is the offending finial that got blown away. It's in pretty poorly shape. My first thought was to just saw it off at the bottom, but when I look into it further, the whole thing is pretty much as rotten as a pear anyway. That's why it's come off. So the wood itself is just rotten. It's been in there for probably 20 years now, and although the greenhouse is cedar, this was softwood, and it really is now extremely softwood. It's pretty badly cracked all the way down anyway, so I thought the best thing I could do is take that as a pattern, run down to Menning Sheds and see if we couldn't knock something up that was, well, adequate, if nothing else. It really only needs to serve as something to screw up through the greenhouse roof to hold the capping piece on that covers all the joints at the head of the octagon or hexagon, I'm not sure what it is, hexagon, that is the actual greenhouse itself. But as I say, this in itself was pretty much shot. So we'll go down to the shed and see what we can find at Menning Sheds, see if they've got any suitable, well, probably 4x4, something like that. Or it may even be that I'll find something that's circular. Yeah, it's 100mm, 4-inch. I had a look down at Menning Sheds. First thing I found was some old timber bollards that we'd got. They treated timber, and one of the guys has been using them to make some very large candle holders, but there's quite a few splits in some of them, and I wasn't really sure about that, and they were quite big diameter to start with. But down in the pile at the other end I found an old table leg which was incredibly heavy. I didn't know what it was at the time, but it looked as if it might fit the bill, and a quick measure up and a compare with the finial itself showed that it was possible to get something out of that. So I just abandoned the idea of using the softwood and went immediately for what I assumed was a hard wood, and then just cut a chunk out of it that would suit me for the build. There's a handy little gadget down at the shed that gives you a centre to find the mark off the centres on the turned items. So we just quickly marked that up and then got it ready and popped into the lathe. Now, this was the first time I'd actually done any turning between centres, other than I think I did a little bit on the one-day course when we were doing cows and beads, but 2-day course it was. but it was the first time I'd actually been left to fly solo doing it. Learned a few things. I got the lathe speed a bit low. Again, having used metalworking lathes, I'd assumed that the lower the speed, the more torque you would have and the better it would be. But in fact it turned out to be the opposite. You need the speed. So I ramped the speed up, and by the time we'd got most of it turned down, I was pretty well getting into the swing of it. Bearing in mind this is only I think the 6th thing I've ever turned on a lathe, it was worth thinking about that really. It's something I'm still very much new to this, and probably using all the wrong tools at the wrong time in the wrong places, but we're getting there slowly. And now we've got possibility of a new lathe in the shed, we may well improve on things. We ended up with something that looked vaguely the right shape and roughly the same height as the old one, fair bit of weight to it, and just parted that off once I'd got it sanded down and in a reasonably smooth state. It's amazing that a little bit of sandpaper makes even the biggest bodge look pretty impressive. Just got the parting tool in and took most of the depth out of it, and then sawed it off by hand for the last inch or so. Don't quite know what would happen if you tried to part it off all the way through, but I imagine you'd have a lot of bits flying around the shed because there's nothing anchoring any of the pieces together. So that's the finished effort. It was pretty hard to do because it's oak that I've found, and it was pretty much of a slog to get it down to size. It's been laminated, which I hadn't realised until I started using it. So whether or not that gives me a problem long term with it breaking down those lines when the water gets in, I don't know. I'm going to give it a couple of coats of cellulose sanding sealer and then I'll wax it, but we'll see how it goes. It should be fine. If not, at least I know now how I can go about making a new one. I just need to tidy that bottom off where it came off the chuck, and I'll give it, as I say, a quick spray with cellulose and wax it, and we can get it back up on the greenhouse roof. So with the finial all waxed up and cellulose sprayed, time to go and fix it. There's just a glass fibre or plastic capping piece that goes on first. Spike's already there, and it was just a matter of screwing it onto that spike. Job done. Looks reasonably okay. Well, that's another little job done. Hopefully we've gained a few brownie points as a result of it. It remains to be seen how well that finish lasts outside. I'm relying on the fact that cellulose sanding sealer is a decent enough finish, but time will tell. I probably should have oiled it, but it is a hardwood oak, so it should survive pretty well even without any finish at all. The only concern is that, as I mentioned before, it might delaminate where it's been glued up, but it takes about a morning to make a new one, so at least I'll know next time. Hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll have something different, I hope, then. See you then. Bye.